In this video, I'll tell you why I think that Games Workshop might be getting rid of Warcry. It's no secret that Warcry is my favorite Games Workshop rule set of, frankly, everything that they currently make. I find that it just sort of ticks all the right boxes for me. Skirmish, size, and gameplay style. Amazing freedom in how you build your war bands and how you can put them together. Clever activation system and dice mechanics. Random cards to kind of determine scenarios and deployment and twists, which keeps everything fresh as you play from game to game. The ability to bring in all kinds of monsters and creatures into the game, and even the new campaign system. It's a great system that even had a great rules update back in 2022. And it seems to me like, unfortunately, they're probably winding it down. The signs are there, I think. They drastically kind of changed the releases this season, for lack of a better term. It used to be that these big boxes would be released every quarter or so with 2 playable forces, a bunch of terrain. Admittedly, it was mostly meat trees, a board, some book content, tokens and whatnot, and then the first one of the new season would also include the actual core book as well. And that initial box would be a little bit more expensive because you're getting the extra book as well. But if you bought into one of the other boxes without the core book, you could, just buy it separately. This season, they changed their format. Instead of releasing a big box every quarter or so, they split the boxes initially. It started with Hunter and Hunted, which came with 2 war bands, kind of a big piece of terrain, and no core book for the rules. And then there was a separate box of terrain called Scales of Talaxis, which also included a board, for you to play on and some tokens as well. The upside, you didn't have to keep buying the big boxes to get the forces and then also keep getting more and more terrain. The downside, if you did buy the forces and the terrain at the same time, it was a stealth price hike. Pachow. Going forward this season, they've just been releasing new boxes with forces included and no new terrain sets. Pyre and Flood came out pretty recently, and they announced Briar and Bone at Adepticon last month. It seems like then you get the choice to buy or not buy terrain, which is good, for those of us who already have terrain that we like, the stuff from the original Warcry box in my case, which is the best terrain they've ever made, in my opinion, right? And we've already kind of built it and painted it, so we don't have to keep buying terrain. This way you can still get the 2 forces, if you actually do want both of them, upon release without having to get, even more meat trees along in the box. Or if you just want one of those 2 forces, you just have to wait about 3 months or so, and then it'll come out in its own box. So none of this really sounds bad for us Warcry enjoyers, does it? It doesn't exactly, but there are other indicators that things aren't as good as we'd like. Games Workshop recently announced that they were getting rid of a couple of entire armies of Age of Sigmar, Pachow, which was a pretty big deal in the community. There was a lot of feelings, right? However, they also announced in that same announcement that many of the Warcry boxes, which had previously been usable in Age of Sigmar, they had war scrolls for them, those would also no longer be usable in Age of Sigmar going forward. Of that list of Warcry Forces being removed from Age of Sigmar play in the next edition, Horns of Hashut, Tantulos Brood, Splintered Fang, The Unmade, Corvus Cabal, Cypher Lords, Scions of the Flame, Iron Golems, Spire Tyrants, Untamed Beasts, I've run out of fingers, and Kagra's Ravagers, which is weird because technically that's I think a Warhammer Underworlds box, but whatever. They still put it in that same section. Only the Horns of Hashut are currently available on the US Games Workshop site. All of the rest of those forces that I just mentioned are marked temporarily out of stock and also online only, which I don't feel bodes well as to whether they'll actually come back. If they had long-term plans for those warbands in Warcry, you'd think they'd still be available to purchase. Admittedly, Games Workshop has had lots of production issues lately, so maybe they'll, decide to finally produce more of those warbands in the future when these production issues get solved, if and when that happens. On the other hand, this could just be a way to kind of out of sight, out of mind these warbands so that when they do finally disappear, fewer Warcry players will notice. If your local shop has one of these boxes and you've been thinking about picking it up, you might want to buy. But more importantly, what about the new players thinking about getting into Warcry? Constantly getting new players into a game is the best way to kind of keep it alive, and currently there's really only one option: the Crypt of Blood starter set. This is a very different kind of starter set than they've put out for Warcry in the past. It's admittedly pretty inexpensive. Well, I mean, for Games Workshop. And it should kind of help you get into the game, but it's also pretty limited. It's almost as if it's designed to be kind of an initial taste to get you to buy more stuff, than an actual starter box. It comes with 4 models per side, some Stormcast Eternals versus some really great looking vampires. Both of these sets are actually models reused from Warhammer Underworlds, another Games Workshop property that kind of seems to be on autopilot, and we'll see how long it lasts as well. There's also 6 small, tiny little pieces of terrain, a double-sided board. On the box, they call it a mat, and it's honestly just thin cardstock, not a board like they say it is on the website. Anyway, and then there's some dice and some tokens and whatnot. It will technically get you started in the game for $110. But if you want to get into the full game, then you'll need to add to the Crypt of Blood box more terrain, more models for your warband to get up to 1,000 points, and probably the actual core book would be nice as well. Crypt of Blood comes with core rules, but not the actual core book, which includes everything that you need to play, including the newer campaign stuff. I'll be honest, I can't tell if this Crypt of Blood set was designed to be a simpler and cheaper intro into Warcry for beginners, or if it was just kind of a stopgap starter box so there was still something for beginners to buy to get them into the game. If you wanted to get into the full game currently, and Crypt of Blood, wasn't going to do it for you, then you'd need a $130 box with 2 forces in it, like Hunter and Hunted or Pyre and Flood. And then you'd need a terrain set like Scales of Talaxis for $112. And then, of course, the core book for $50. That comes to $292 to get started fully in Warcry, whereas the previous full starter, which was called Heart of Gur, was $230 when it released back in 2022. That said, you can still find Heart of Gur online, not through GW's site, but through other sites, for less than $200 currently. And maybe that's an indicator. If you can still get Heart of Gur from 2022 online from resellers like Amazon and Miniature Market, and they're selling it for less than retail, then perhaps Warcry isn't selling well for Games Workshop. These recent changes to the way that they sell the game, like splitting the terrain from the forces and making a really simple starter set, could be direct responses to Warcry sales frankly being pretty soft. I know that I see far more Kill Team events than Warcry events at the conventions and tournaments that I go to. And again, this is a bummer for me because I think Warcry is the best rule set that they make. However, I'm a bit used to this as well. It seems like the things that I like, certain GW Miniatures games, specific ice cream flavors, menu items at restaurants that I like to go to, all that kind of stuff, right? They have a tendency to not be generally popular and then they disappear. I like them a lot, but your average folks don't seem to, and then they're not economically viable to keep making anymore. and then they disappear. Happens to me for some reason all the time. That said, no tabletop game is ever truly dead, as I've said time and time again on this channel. If you have the game and the miniatures and all that stuff and keep playing it with your friends, it never dies. Sure, it might not get any new stuff or, points adjustments or FAQs or whatever, but that's not completely a bad thing. You and your friends can always house rule things that you think need fixing. Look at Mordheim. GW hasn't made that game for nearly 20 years for reasons that honestly no one understands, but there's still a huge community playing it. So that's the way I see it. I feel like the writing on the wall might be spelling the end of Warcry. Maybe I'm being over-concerned. Honestly, I hope I am, I hope that we see years more of releases for the Games Workshop game that I enjoy. But with all of the moves that GW has been making lately to pare things down in their gaming ranges, including the announcements of just a few days ago, I'm not so sure that Warcry isn't next on the chopping block. What do you think? I could be wrong. I could be right. Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video and videos like this, hitting the like button with the thumbs thing, that would be great. I appreciate it. It always helps the channel and helps get the videos out to more people out there who might want to know these things. Also, if you're interested in seeing videos like this every single Friday, feel free to sub. They'll show up in your little inbox. You can click the bell, I guess, if you want to do that. That's cool too. And thanks for watching.